In a vast ocean, how do you detect an object as small and deadly as this submarine? That's the question being tested at exercise Proud Manta off the coast of Sicily, an anti-submarine warfare exercise involving ships, aircraft and submarines from 10 NATO nations. As these Italian helicopters take off in the shadow of Sicily's Mount Etna, they're headed for a different Etna, an Italian naval ship. It's out here supporting the NATO ships and aircraft who have come to hone their submarine hunting skills. With an area of over 6,000 square kilometres to work in, finding a submarine is no easy task.
It's still quite difficult, but it's not impossible. The training we had out here, we included all the methods that are used to find submarines. Passive sonar, active sonar, magnetic anomaly detection, and the most capable and most likely way of finding submarines is the old eyeball of the person. So it's still a hard problem, and as the submarines get quieter and more stealthy, it's a cat and mouse game where the mouse is also running as fast as the cat sometimes.
As the German frigate Lübeck uses active sonar to scan the area, 2 Merlin helicopters, one Italian and one British, lower their sonars into the water. They send out pulses of sound, searching for echoes that could indicate a hostile submarine. For the surface vessels, being able to manoeuvre quickly is often the best defence. In this scenario, the ships are able to call on a maritime patrol aircraft, which drops a smoke signal to signify an attack with an air-launched torpedo. Submarines may not hit the headlines too often today, but there's a good reason why these exercises still take place.
One of NATO's purposes in the military dimension is to be ready, to respond where and when there's a threat to NATO, and as directed by the political dimension of NATO. So I see us as like an insurance policy where we need to train and practice to be ready. Right now there's no what I'll call specific submarine threat to NATO. But over the last, say, 2 decades, the number of submarine operating nations in the world and also the number of total submarines that these nations have has increased quite dramatically. And in fact, one of the most likely new purchase of many navies is a submarine. So there's, in one hand, a lot of capability going out, and as we've just seen here recently in the Mediterranean, where what was the status quo can change in a matter of minutes to days.
The Greek submarine Proteus surfaces, signalling the end of the exercise. Both the hunter and the hunted will have learnt lessons from today's encounter. One new element of this year's exercise is the introduction of glider technology. Developed at the NATO Undersea Research Centre, these gliders are able to go hundreds of kilometres on very small amounts of power.
AUVs and the autonomous underwater vehicles typically have a propeller. Gliders don't. They are buoyancy controlled, and by changing the buoyancy of the vehicle, they convert the vertical motion into some form of propulsion, basically. That makes the vehicle very efficient and very endurant. Typically, this vehicle can stay in the water for weeks, as opposed to AUVs, which have a typical endurance of a number of hours.
The gliders take hundreds of measurements, which build up a complete picture of the operating environment.
So basically, from a temperature and salinity, we can compute the sound velocity profile, and this is the fundamental input to the sonar equation.
It all helps to keep every type of NATO unit, whether underwater, on the surface or up in the air, on top of their game. This is David Heathfield in Sicily for NATO Channel.